This week's guest is the founder and CEO of Frendo, a global digital health platform focused on building data and care infrastructure for women with endometriosis and other chronic women's health issues. She herself was diagnosed with stage 4 endometriosis after nearly 2 decades of misdiagnoses and founded Frendo as a result. As a mother to a daughter, she is particularly driven to ensure the next generation of girls do not face the same delays, dismissal, and misinformation, and that women's health is treated with the equity and urgency it deserves. She's from Dublin, but lives in London. Dearbhail Ormond, welcome to the hEireann podcast.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be part of it.
Well, thank you for getting in touch with me, actually. So I would have been aware of the Frendo app because I've endometriosis myself. And Dearbhail Instagrammed me to invite me to a launch event. And unfortunately, I couldn't go. But then I thought, I have a podcast. I'm going to ask you. So thank you very much for joining us. And for people who don't know about Frendo, you can find more about it on the hEireann.ie website. So the basis of this podcast, Dearbhail, is 3 defining moments. And it would be great if you could tell us about your first defining moment.
I think it's great that you're doing this because there are so many wonderful Manona here. And I think from my first defining moment is not necessarily just one moment. I think it is motherhood, really. It wasn't that moment I gave birth. I didn't really have that, big emotional connection that lots of people talk about, which I also think is important to say and to admit. I think partly maybe that was because of my history and being told that motherhood would never be on the cards for me. I think, it took a while to register in a way, but the bond that has grown with my daughter, who's just turned 5, is just something that has really defined my life and continues to ground me in a way. I think that unconditional love that comes from her and that you have for them is something I'm not sure I had before. And I think really has given me a sense of huge gratitude and perspective. So I think that is one of the biggest defining moments.
And when you were told that were you told outright that you wouldn't have children, or was it, oh, maybe?
No, it was that I wouldn't have children naturally. And I think that really frames your life in a way, being told at such a young age, like in my 20s, that I wouldn't naturally conceive. I suppose what that did was it framed a lot of how I looked at relationships. It framed how I looked at my career. I kind of dove into my career. Um, and it really, I think, held me back from connection a lot in a way, in particular in relationships. So it was a huge shock and a huge miracle and huge blessing to be able to have her. And I think, I think I'm grateful every single day. Now, Jesus, she pushes my buttons. She's definitely a Manona hair and she will be. But she's just great. And I think it has defined me in a different way.
Yeah, I have a 5-year-old as well. Yeah, I was thinking to myself that I never knew I needed him until he
Yeah.
arrived.
I know, it's strange. It's strange, yeah. And I think often, and there are people I'm sure listening who don't want children or they haven't been, lucky enough to have them. And I think that unconditional love can come from elsewhere, absolutely. But for me, I hadn't felt it in this way.
Yeah, yeah. Oh. Okay, so your second defining moment.
Yeah. It ties in with it, actually. I think it is illness, really. And I lived with unanswered illness for the guts of 20 years. Grew up in Dublin, was very lucky to have access to probably more, medical care because of my father being a GP, but still went undiagnosed for nearly 20 years until I was diagnosed with stage 4 endo in Australia. Um, and I think in those early days when nobody knew what was wrong and I didn't know what was wrong, there was a huge loss of trust in my own self, in my own body. And I think it did define me in terms of, really affecting my self-esteem, questioning, is this really actually happening or is this in my head? Going through many misdiagnoses. And I would say, sadly, it shaped me, but I also think it defined this moment that, that led me to build something that I am just so hugely passionate about, which is frendo. And but also it took, that isolation that I felt into this incredible connection with thousands of women through frendo, and who we all kind of validate one another and we all hear one another. So I think, that earlier sadness and distress and loneliness has turned into this beautiful community of women trying to help one another. And it also, I suppose, shaped a lot of my beliefs around health equity and that access and treatment and understanding and being heard, just it shouldn't really be just a privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be similar to you in the sense that I wasn't diagnosed for a very long time, and w- you know, I like. I think it's interesting because we, as Irish women, that we can achieve so much.
Yeah.
When we're ill, we have endometriosis, but yet we can work really hard. We can achieve this and then collapse in bed, with pain and um so it's and yeah, it's interesting. So did you then so you got so did you before you started Frendo, had you got to a point where you were helped and you were feeling better, or were you still in a bad way?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I had been diagnosed, so I was diagnosed in my early 30s. I started Frendo 6 years ago, so I'm old, so that's why. But no, I had had two surgeries. I was living in Australia and I was working at KPMG there, heading up the high growth ventures, the startup practice. And I think I always had a sense that I wanted to do something around endometriosis, whether it was write about it or I didn't quite know. And then the idea came when I was living in Sydney. I just saw this. I was meeting more women, not many though, then who had and who are suffering in silence and in isolation. Um, and so that the idea started as a social network and a community. And then I moved back to Ireland then. And really that's when I started to build what it is now, which is much more than a community. The real issue I saw was screening and helping people at that very first point when, mostly when they're girls. And so I was still living in pain. I was probably, 70% of the month living in pain. It's really only improved in the last 2 years since I had a hysterectomy, and it hasn't even, and I'm still having issues, but that's really when the idea came, and to start, okay, giving both patient and clinicians a means to articulate their symptoms, to feel heard. Like that really was the big thing, because I think when you're living with this kind of pain, as you said, we just crack on, right? We just get on with things, and then the pain improves and we forget how bad it was. So with Frendo, I wanted to give women and girls this tool to say to a doctor, this is what I'm dealing with. Please hear me.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said that it went from kind of a community app to now more data and care infrastructure. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it's grown into so much more. It started as that, like I mentioned, kind of giving people a tool to be able to feel heard. And then as it developed, I felt really strongly about removing the onus just to be on the sufferer, and on the patient. And we developed the Frendo at Work offering, because 1 in 6 people lose their job because of endometriosis. You lose over a third of the month on average as a result of loss of productivity. So really, it was creating a program for corporates and for workplaces to understand the disease more, to understand how it's impacting individuals, and also to how to retain those staff, because that was becoming a big issue. So the program really focuses around the chronic nature of endometriosis. So a patient has surgery, they don't just come back and they're cured. They have to go back into the world, whether it's motherhood, whether it's, into work. And so that part of that program is around fertility support, around communication support. So how do I actually explain this to my manager? And as a manager, how do I support them? So it's that reciprocal support. And then chronic pain, pelvic health support. So that's really what the program it's aimed to do. And yeah, we were really, really delighted to have Salesforce as our first customer, offering it to their 80,000 workforce. So I think what I've seen in the last couple of years is that there is, a bigger understanding around the effects of this on women, but also a desire to support them. But it still has to improve.
Yeah, and it's such a great idea to be in workplaces, and again, you would have thought that there will be lots more of this done already, but it's brilliant that there's an Irish woman behind Brenda doing this.
And an
Um,
Irish company.
and an Irish company, and an Irish company. Um, so well done. Your third defining moment.
Um, I think he'd be surprised that I'd say this, but the third defining moment is probably meeting my partner, Jean. And I think that we're very different. I'm kind of entrepreneurial and moving all the time, and and he's very steady. He's very grounded, but also I think that defined a part of my life in a way, more so around the trust and stability that he gave me. I also think that was something that I wasn't quite aware I was missing. And yeah, I really was missing. And I think that, helps me show up in the way I do in life. So it's a slightly different defining broader moment. But I think because of what I mentioned earlier around the impact that this condition has on relationships and on how you see yourself, I think having a partner who, um, men don't always understand this. But I think for me, Jean gives me a trust that I really didn't have before.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think um, relationships are really impacted because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, you have a chronic illness, and you're up and down, or
Yeah.
your mood, and it can affect your energy levels, and it can affect everything that you do. And having a partner that can support you, but it, you know, it's not a pity party for them at all, but it can be hard on the relationship as well,
Absolutely.
from both sides, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a societal issue, this disease, because it impacts everyone around that person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not just a woman's issue
No.
because we affect a lot of people.
Yeah, damn right we do.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for your three defining moments. Now for more questions about Manon Heron. So, what comes to mind when you think of Manon Heron? Like, what does being a Ban Heron, Manon Heron mean to you?
Yeah, I think Manon Heron are resilience that comes to mind, but not hardened. You know, I think there's a strength there, um, but there's a warmth, you know, that allows us to connect. And I think, yeah, like you alluded to it earlier, you said it earlier, we carry a lot, right? Often quietly. And that's probably women across the board. But I think with Irish women, we still will always show up for others as well. So there, I think I see when I think of Manon Heron and Ban Heron, I think like, you know, strength, but also softness. And you know, the lightness we like, why do people love the Irish? Is it because there's a lightness and we bring a bit of humor and it doesn't take away from depth? But I think, you know, that is one of the reasons we love, I love connecting with Irish women.
Yeah. Strength. Did you say strength but softness or strength and
Yeah.
softness?
Strength and softness. I think direct, powerful, but there's a warmth that allows that connection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. That was quite beautiful, Dearbhail.
Oh,
I'll get them done up in t-shirts. Strength and softness.
you get the t-shirt.
Yeah. Um, and then, who are the Irish women you look up to?
Hmm. I think you're not going to be surprised with the first one that I mentioned. My nearly 92-year-old grandaunt, so my granny's sister, Lelia Doolan. Um, Talk about direct, but powerful and very, you know, values led. She's incredible. She was involved in broadcasting and in, you know, heavily involved in the arts. Back at a time in Ireland when it really needed strong voices, you know, and boy, she never held back. And it cost her her job, you know, in that time. But I mean, look, we could spend the whole time here talking about her. She's done a huge amount. She's doing a walk at the moment for you know, like for peace, really. But I think Lelia gives the impression that she doesn't really care what people think, but actually she cares deeply, deeply for the right thing and for speaking up for the people who can't speak up. Um, and I think, yeah, I'm in awe of her, like in awe of her. But she's not the only woman in my family, I suppose, like that. I have been lucky enough to be surrounded by women who encouraged me to trust my own values and to speak up for them and to speak up for others, you know, as
Mhm.
well.
And just for people who are listening, so your grandaunt, I think she went viral, you know, because she she's a viral superstar. She was at wasn't it Shannon Airport, and
Yeah,
she is walking. She's 91, and she's walking from
yeah,
Shannon Airport to Dublin. 91 years of
yeah.
age. Unbelievable.
Yeah, she'll finish on Wednesday, the 15th of April. Yeah.
A
Yeah,
true
I
bad
mean, look,
Nairn.
true, true. Yeah, through and through, Banna Heron. Yeah, just, you know, she has this like boundless energy, and she just has like charisma to beat the band in terms of, but she does it her way, right? She does it. And, you know, she would instill, and so would her grandmother and, you know, my mother, in that, you know, this is what you're here for. You're here to speak up for what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
And my grandfather, George Colley, would have been very similar, you know, um, he he in his time in politics, like he really listened to the people and he wanted to make the right change for the people. So I think it's I'm in awe of them.
Amazing influences on you and your family, and
Mm,
that is passed down through the years.
mm, mm.
And then just, do you have the best bit of advice you got from an Irish woman?
Um, the best bit of advice I'd say is not like one piece of advice. I would say another woman another band hEireann who I would absolutely look up to is my mother. And she entered politics in a very difficult time in politics and Collie, in the 80s, and was spokesperson for justice. But then later on, after politics, went on to chair the Collie Report, which was she chaired a working group on civil unions in Ireland. So I think, again, there are so many women in my family who are trying to drive progress in as tangible way as possible, but I think personally for me with my mum, she always made me feel like you can go for anything, in particular in my career. I think there's also an Irish way of kind of, not bigging you up too much though, but it was kind of this inner strength that she gave me, and I think I think my parents always had a trust in me, an underlying trust that I'd figure things out. And I think that's huge. But my mum, not necessarily a piece of advice, but I think it was really that trust that was instilled in me, and that you just keep going. Even in the hard times, when you're sick or when you're starting a business, you keep pushing forward and that you can do this, like whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, but there's nothing to stop you.
Yeah, I think a lot of our mothers
Yeah.
instilled
Yeah, it's
that
an
in us.
Irish mammy thing.
It
Yeah,
is an Irish mammy thing, but I think it's because of the
I
years
do.
they grew
Yeah.
up, and then they're like, right, daughters, you go and show them, you
I
know?
think it is. Yeah, because it was a time of change then and progression, but not quite. And now
Yeah,
they're trying to push us on to really make the change.
yeah, exactly. I didn't know your mum was, it's Anne Colley.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't know that. And that just shows again that, like, well, we're all linked in Ireland,
Yeah.
but also the nice surprises we all have in our lives, So
Yeah.
that's really amazing. And then just the next one. So, is your favorite Irish word or saying or phrase, and it can be in Irish Oscuelga or it can be in English.
I think it's Machri, Machali and Machri. Um, it's kind of how I look at my daughter. And yeah, that is probably it.
I know it's a lovely. Machree is a lovely phrase,
Yeah.
and nobody. We're both in the UK, and if you're not Irish, you don't know what Machree
You don't.
means, which is okay. And then the very important questions at the very end. It's quick fire. Tato or King crisps? Which do you prefer?
Tato on its own, but I like King if I'm eating it with chocolate.
Oh my, that's so interesting.
Yeah, King crisps go so well with like Galaxy chocolate and chocolate. Yeah. Yeah.
How did you work that one out?
A long time ago. Long time ago. Possibly when I wasn't feeling very well and I was just mixing all food or something. But yeah. But then again, where were we recently? I don't know, was it we're in Dubai or somewhere really quite far away, and I saw King crisps and I was like, I have to get these for my daughter,
Uh,
No, Tato, yeah. I saw Tato crisps and I had to get them for my daughter.
yeah, I know. Um, then tea, Lyons tea or Barry's tea?
Barry's.
A lot of
Yeah.
people are saying Barry's. I think Lyons may listen to this and have to come up with a marketing plan. Um,
Unless they
we-
want to sponsor it, Gear.
well, no, that's true. We might cut this piece out. How many cups of tea do you drink a day?
I only drink I have to start the day with tea. Like I'm those I don't know if it's an Irish thing or an English thing, but I go away with my bag of tea bags, wherever I go. And I have to start with a cup of tea, before coffee, before breakfast. And then I like one in the afternoon,
Okay, so
with a
two.
little king and galaxy chocolate or something.
Bit of whiskey.
Exactly.
Throw it all in.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you so much. That's the end.
Is it? Oh gosh.
Yeah. Oh, it's been really great chatting to you,
That's it.
and well done on everything you've achieved because it's really impactful, and
Oh,
I think that's it just stands to you and stands to
oh,
being a Banna Manon Heron. So thank you,
thank you.
Gaurav.
Means a lot.
Yeah, no, I'm delighted I'm delighted serendipity or whatever you want to call it, you contacting me. So it's been fantastic having you, and I'm going to finish saying Gurav Mila Magot.
Gurb Míle Mágada.